strong.
Chapter 131. Listen to the Wind Party. Yi Fuxian and his group approached to the high platform. At this time, they only heard a cold drink, Yi Fuxian. At this time, the people around him were very chaotic, so Yi Fuxian did not pay attention to the Nandu family. Until this cold drink, he turned his eyes and looked at the Nandu family. Nandu was in the crowd and he looked very cold. Through the idea of killing. A crackling sound came out, and the people of the Nandu family did not have any nonsense, and the spell bloomed directly on Yi Fuxian. At this time, the figure next to Yi Fuxian stepped out, and took a slight step forward. In one step, the wood attribute spell that was rolling towards Yi Fuxian was instantly destroyed, and at the same time, a terrifying sword appearance enveloped the space in an instant. It became colder, everyone who came to the Nandu family was enveloped in it, and couldn't help but shiver. This small area of space seemed to freeze. The people of the Nandu family saw the figure that appeared in front of Yi Fuxian, and they were shocked. Yi Fuxian was protected by such a powerful person. What is the reason for the disappearance of the strong man of the Nandu family in the East China Sea? Yi Fuxian suddenly appeared in the field of vision earlier. They didn't think about it at all. The first thought was to take Yi Fuxian down. But at this moment, when they saw such a strong character, they seemed to be awake. Yi Fuxian, why would he dare show up at the listening party? Don't worry, I will go to the Nandu family in Donghai City sooner or later. Yi Fuxian glanced at the Nandu family and then continued to move forward without any attachment. Of course, it was impossible for Jing Yu to listen to the Wind Party. A place to kill. Footsteps forward, Jing Yu and the others marched forward together. The people from the Nandu family stood there motionless, looking at the handsome figure who had left. No one was chasing, they could naturally feel Jing Yu's strength. What is going on? Yi Fuxian's appearance is really strange, but they can't think of it. Tianzi had a listening party. Why did Yi Fuxian dare to come? Although Jing Yu is strong, no matter how strong it is impossible to compete with the emperor of the Nandu kingdom, which is the existence of Wang Hujing, and the entire Nandu country is only one person. In the Nandu kingdom, the Nandu family was too diligent to take care of themselves. Of course, it was impossible to know what was happening in the Kangai kingdom. In fact, only the Luo family would pay attention to the dynamics of the neighboring countries. Hence, the family of the Nandu family wouldn't know if they wanted to break their heads. Here comes another emperor. Many palace guards appeared, maintaining order, standing around the 9 battle platforms, and in front of them, the mighty people descended. The palace guards opened the way, and the nobles of the king stood up to meet each other. In the direction of the palace, a mighty figure walked towards this side. The 4 people standing together seemed to chat first, like good friends. These 4 people are unmatched in popularity, and the noisy space is quiet for a while. After that, everyone's eyes saw the figure that appeared. They knew Luo Tianzi was there, but who were the other 3? The 4 figures came to the stands in front of each other, and each sat down, seemingly having the same status, and it shocked many people. Today, the Nandu kingdom is listening to the Wind Party. I specially invited the 3 kingdoms of Kangyeguo, Yunkou kingdom and Dian kingdom to come and observe the ceremony. Let's admire the arrogance of the descendants of the Nandu kingdom. The upcoming emperor is disappointed, Luo Tianzi said while smiling and introducing the person. Suddenly there was a commotion among the crowd. In addition to the Nandu kingdom facing the sea, the 3 big countries on the border came together to come and listen to the party. At this audience, there were 4 emperors and 4 princes. At this time, under the 4 emperors, several people went to take their seats one after another. Around Nandu Luo Tianzi, Prince Luo Junlin and other princes and princesses arrived, but only Luo Junlin could sit next to Luo Xianzi. The next direction is left and right. Left is now no longer in the eyes of the past, as if he no longer cares about everything. Hua is brilliant, although things in Donghai City have not been done, but left is the opposite. This is the greatest pleasure for him. Jing Yu and Yi Fuxian and their team went in the direction where Yi Tianzi was. As Kangai Galai, they naturally followed Kangai Guoxianzi. The people of the Nandu family always pay attention to Yi Fuxian. When they saw Yi Fuxian not only avoiding the sight of Luo Tianzi, but walking to the other side, someone faintly guessed something, and his heart trembled slightly. Isn't that Yi Fuxian and the rest of my life? Among the large crowd, there were several great powers from Donghai City, and when they saw Yi Fuxian's figure, they were all stunned. The people in Donghai Zugong naturally noticed that Yan Shao was frowning. What happened? His eyes looked at Luo Tianzi and Hua Xiang. Luo Tianzi and Hua Xiang didn't seem to care at all, as if they already knew. Zhuo King and the other disciples in the East China Sea Academy looked different after seeing Yi Fuxian. Of course Lin Ziyu saw it too. Her beautiful eyes froze there. He never thought that he could see Yi Fuxian at the banquet. Yi Fuxian and others walked forward step by step until they arrived at the bottom of Yi Tianzi. The people in the Nandu family trembled slightly, and trembled violently, as if they understood something. The reason why Yi Fuxian dared to appear in the Nandu kingdom was because of the support of a prominent prince and emperor of the Kandai kingdom. Donghai Zugong's eyes became very beautiful, staring at the figure of Yi Fuxian who was sitting slowly. Yi Fuxian, go to Kandai kingdom. With only 1 month left, Yi Fuxian fled from the Nandu kingdom and went straight to the enemy country of the Kandai kingdom, and he was rewarded by Heavenly Father. Now he is back on the day of the Wind Feast, but does not attend the Wind Party, but to come watch the ceremony. Zhuo Qing's heart was a little cold for a moment. He came to the banquet to listen to the wind. I wonder if he can release the light, and Yi Fuxian has sat beside Tianzi, even though it is not Luo Tianzi. Yan Xiao glanced at Zhuo Qing next to him, and then looked at another person, and said, Tianhao, that person is the person you have always wanted to see. Twin soul and soul, full genius Yi Fuxian genius, can you beat him? Yun Tianhao looked at Yi Fuxian's figure. In fact, he had watched Yi Fuxian for a long time, because they knew each other, but when they found out, they were still young. In Qingzhou Zugong, the two fought each other as He Zuixu Palace Genius was even defeated by Yi Fuxian. Then he went to study and went to East China Sea Academy earlier this year. Once entered the academy, it caused a shock in the academy. Then, he heard another name, Yi Fuxian's name, the name he kept in his heart. I will beat him. Yun Tianhao slowly spoke, life and soul twins, all attributes. It turns out that this is all his talent. The left phase, sitting under Luo Tianzi, looked at Yi Fuxian, and looked at Yi Tianzi again, feeling lonely in his heart. After the trip to Qingzhou City, he valued Yi Fuxian not only for himself, but also for the future of the Luo family. However, their hearts were unpredictable, and they actually guessed that they had disapproval and thought that Yi Fuxian had the life of the king and would threaten him. After arriving at the Luo family, after the letter of intent reached the East China Sea, everything was beyond repair, and he forcibly rushed to Donghai City and was no longer trusted when he returned. If he is Luo Tianzi, Yi Fuxian will definitely be killed at all costs. Even if Yi Tianzi is angry, many people will die, but it is better than the destruction of the royal family in the future, but Luo Tianzi can't do it. Although Luo Tianzi would believe in the number of lives and believe in it, in reality he would not believe it completely. He was self-conscious and thought that as a strong person in the prince's kingdom, nothing changed the number of lives. Zhao Xiang naturally would not persuade Luo Tianzi. Even if he could persuade him, he would never offer any plans to Luo Tianzi again. Of course, he also knew that he would never want to leave. Luo Tianzi will not use it, but will not want to use it. Let him go. The reason why he didn't kill him was because he was innocent. Luo Tianzi's many officials were dug up and promoted. If there is no reason to kill him, it will leave many people cold. I heard that not long ago Kang Yi Fenghuaban ended. Are they Tianzhao on the Fenghua list? Yun Chuguo's Chu Tianzi looked at Yi Fuxian and the others with a smile. The top 10 people on the Fenghua list, my right lady can't come because of something. Yi Tianzi smiled. In my deeply swallowed country, those with great talent for spiritual practice will have the opportunity to be appreciated, and even respected and worshipped, and this has been the case for generations. This system has long been entrenched in the hearts of everyone in the world. Herr Erlang will appear alone, there is no need to hold the boring banquet. I have always wanted to know, you can actually choose a great person at the banquet every few years. Yangguo Tianzi's day also said, his eyes averted. A glimpse of the people under Yi Tianzi. This discourse even includes Luo Tianzi, who is holding a banquet for the wind but Luo Tianzi doesn't seem to care, only smiles lightly. The methods of different countries are different, but the goal is the same. If you come to witness the ceremony, you can see if there is any extraordinary arrogance, and everyone will see it. In addition, some of them also carry the characters of the younger generation. If you are interested, you can let them go up and try, I won't mind. Luo Tianzi continued. The people brought by the emperor of the Yunchu kingdom and the Dian kingdom are indeed juniors. They are the most outstanding Tianzhao characters of the Yunchu kingdom and Dian kingdom. Take them to witness ceremonies and listen to dazzling talent parties in other countries. How about this? Currently, the listening party has not officially been held. I don't know which dazzling character will appear, but Yi Fuxian and them have attracted geniuses from both countries. From time to time, they would look at Yi Fuxian. At this time, Luo Tianzi stood up and said to the endless figures in the distance, listen to today's banquet, the 4 heavenly emperors are watching this grand event, and it's all up to you. I hope to watch you in awe. Chapter 132, Tit for Tat. Luo Tianzi's words fell, and on the 9 battle platforms, someone stepped up to lead the banquet. Listening to the wind party is different from Feng Hua's party, but the 9 battle platforms start to fight at the same time. Because once every 10 years, listening to the wind party will open the conditions a little more, divided by the world, the 5-star glory world to the 3rd order law world. These 8 worlds, each world occupies a battle platform, only allowed to fight with the world, for choose the most powerful group of people in the main world. The platform in the middle is for those who are in a higher realm, who are under the age of 25, and whose realm is higher than a third-tier rule of law. You can come to the center of the platform to shine your own light. In this way, the age level is enough to range from 16 to 25, exactly 10 years old, and listening to the Wind Party, held once every 10 years, talented people born every 10 years, don't miss it. The rules were simple and easy, and much more efficient than Fenghua Banyan, but they could more directly see the level of talent and combat power that each person possessed. Yi Fuxian sat quietly in the stands. Of course he would not ask Luo Tianzi outside the palace of the Nandu king. Even so far, he didn't really look at Luo Tianzi, nor did Luo Tianzi and Prince Edward look at him. Both sides seemed to have a tacit understanding to forget what happened in Donghai City. No one would take the initiative to mention it. Today is listening to the Wind Party, and he is the guest who came to watch the ceremony with Yi Tianzi. Looking at each of the 9 battle platforms, and the vast and endless numbers in front of the 9 battle platforms, Yi Fuxian understood that the scale of listening to the Wind Party was much larger than the Fenghua Party, which spanned 10 years, where the Nandu country must have there are many real evildoers who are born again. However, this wasn't enough to make waves in his heart, evil. No matter how bad. The battle of the 9 battle platforms began to erupt, and the atmosphere rose instantly. Many eyes stared at the 9 battle platforms in front of them. The geniuses of the younger generation were burning with a strong sense of awe, and they were ready to step up to perform. Yi Tianzi thought, how does my Nandao Guo listen to the Wind Party compared to your Kangyi Guo Fenghua Yan? Luo Tianzi looked at Yi Tianzi beside him and asked with a smile. The scale is bigger, the number of participants is bigger, but the efficiency is too low. But the Tianzhao character born in the end is not always comparable to my Kangyi Gafeng Huayan, Yi Tianzi said with a smile. Yi Tianzi is confident. Luo Tianzi smiled. I Nandu Guo hears the wind blows once every 10 years. The 10-year-old genius Yi Tianzi thinks it's not as good as your Kangyi kingdom for 3 years. You must understand that top geniuses are never judged by time. Is it Nandu or Kangai? How many years is a talented prince? Yi Tianzi said quietly, and the 4 kingdoms nodded in agreement with Yi Tianzi. In this case, how difficult it is for Wang Hao to become the emperor of a country. It's too rare to have princely talent, and not enough to have talent. Too many geniuses died on the way to growth, not to mention it took a lucky prince to become a prince. Such people certainly appeared in the hundreds of years of history in the 4 countries, and there must have been more than one person, but they may not have been discovered by them and used by them. Luo Tianzi, you are not lucky enough. Yi Tianzi smiled slightly. Luo Tianzi's eyes flashed sharply. This sentence, hidden meaning. Since Yi Tianzi collected flowers and interpreted those words as a virtuous daughter, and seemed to state that she would protect Yi Fuxian, she naturally knew a lot of things. As one of the princes of Prince Talon, there is one or even more than one warrior in the Nandu kingdom. Zhao Xiang personally counted the number of lives. Because it is the gift of the prince, naturally he has the gift of the prince, and not the prince cannot be heaven. But unfortunately, this person has the temperament of an emperor, and is in love with a descendant of the Wajiayu old royal family and the Nandu country. Both of them may have the life of a king. In this way, even with the talent of the prince, it is impossible for them. Of course it is impossible to stay. If Waji promised to enter the palace to become a concubine, her luck would belong to her son Luo Junlin, which was a pity. Is that true? Luo Tianzi smiled slightly. Although the talents of princes are rare, they appear occasionally, but most of them fall on the road to become stronger, and some people can become real princes. In the discourse, there is a hidden murder. Luo Tianzi is right. I heard that Prince Luo Nanlin of the Nandu Kingdom is also considered to have princely talent. I don't know if I can really have the chance to grow into a princely character. Yi Tianzi smiled, and the dialogue between the two was tit for tat. Luo Tianzi hinted that even if he had the talent of a prince, he might die the same way, implying that he would kill Yi Fuxian. Yi Tianzi fought back, and Luo Junlin also had the talent of a prince. Will he die too? In fact, it warned Luo Tianzi that you dared to touch me. Luo Tianzi's mouth drew a cold smile, sharper than the blade. Yi Fuxian naturally heard the conversation between the two, but hiding in the chat room, he definitely understood that Yi Tianzi would protect him, otherwise he would not take him. Are these two playing a mystery? The emperor next to Yun Chuguo said lightly. The conversation between the two seemed meaningful and they were at odds in secret, but he didn't understand. Countries will pay attention to major events in other kingdoms, such as listening to Feng Yan and Feng Huayan, and they will know which character is the most dazzling in Feng Hua Ban. However, in the East China Sea city of Nandu country, they will not really care, especially since they are emperors. How could they have so much time to manage these things, even the genius named Feng Huayan? In the world of practitioners, even if you are the son of heaven, there is still only one thing that matters most: practice and strength. Therefore, the dialogue between the two people of the Yunku kingdom was slightly understood, and it was a bit blurry, which might be related to the genius who claimed to be the Nandu kingdom at the Fenghua banquet. Yun Chugua also brought some talented juniors out this time. Not long ago, at the Fenghua party hosted by Kandai Guo, there were some very talented juniors. If possible, you can communicate with each other, Luo Tianzi said with a smile. Yunku Guoxianzi smiled slightly, glanced at Yunku Guoxianzhao sitting under him, and smiled. Did you hear? The younger Tianzhao smiled and looked at Yi Fuxian, Yi Wuchen and the others. One of them, a young man wearing a Jinyi suit, said with a smile, I have also heard the news about Fenghua Ban for a second or two. He is actually a man of 7-star glory, which is quite interesting. The genius who uses the 7-star glory world may have super talent. Someone laughed. Is it the defeated Falun Gong? It is said that it is also on the list of glory. Yun Chuguo's descendants chatted casually, Yu Jiang and Bai Qiu's faces darkened, and the irony of the words naturally understood it. Naturally, you can beat your Fa phase. A faint voice came out, not as ironic as Yun Chuguo's younger generation, but responding in the most direct voice. The person who spoke was Yi Wuchen, and his people were like his sword. He rarely drew a sword, and when he did, he was extremely sharp. Really, if you have the chance, ask for advice. The youth in Jinyuafu smiled and opened his mouth, not angry. As the arrogant person of all countries, he is standing on the opposite side. Of course it is a tit for tat, which will affect his mood. After the day is over, I will take you to Wangcheng. At this time, let's secretly cherish it. At this time, the southern prince Guo Luluolin said. Many people looked at him. Luo Junlin's fame is very young, he is still young. Lightness is considered the future emperor of the Nandu kingdom, and no one can shake him. To become a prince, it is necessary to enter the world of princes, so Luo Junlin is a prince in the future. Listening to Today on the Holidays must be very boring. A junior Dian Guo said lightly, without much interest. Listening to such a large-scale party, the geniuses of the nation came to the stage to fight. There are many people just gathered to try their own strength. They are not vulnerable, even if sometimes there are some brilliant characters. How can they get into their eyes? Except for the geniuses who were finally chosen, the current battle was boring for them. Really, what do you think of that person? Luo Junlin smiled slightly and pointed his finger at one of the battlefields. It was the battlefield of the 7-star glory world. At this moment a battle erupted on the battlefield. A very young man Tianzhao stands at the peak and has won several matches in a row. He is good at fighting, moreover step by step, he can fight head to head with battles without wasting time. This person has been fighting, constantly defeating strong players from all sides. No one is his opponent. It can even be said that he is vulnerable. His carving array can summon various auras, turn them into powerful spells, and give off a terrifying power. Glory, I am afraid that it is difficult for someone to defeat him. Hua Xiang said lightly. This person must be the genius named Yun Tianhao who told him to pay attention to him. Yan Shao said that this person's soul is a ray __ can fight with all aura attributes. The potential is endless. If you can be ordered by a famous teacher, you can fly to the sky. Yi Fuxian's eyes also fell on that battle platform. When he saw the other side, he was a little surprised, because he knew this person, or when he was in Qingzhou, Zugong and Heiling Zugong came to challenge him. People fought one battle and defeated another through engraving. However, Yun Tianhao was clearly more mature than before. After winning several matches in a row, Yun Tianhao finally stopped. He looked at the Tianzi grandstand. Yi Fuxian found that Yun Tianhao was actually staring at him. It seemed that Yun Tianhao was worried about the battle. Yi Fuxian smiled at Yun Tianhao, and then saw Yun Tianhao coming down, walking towards a place in the crowd, and following the direction he left, Yi Fuxian saw Yan Shao, and Zhuo King and others from the East China Sea Academy. Strong man. He also saw Lin Ziyu was also there. Maimu looked at him. What is the East China Sea Palace? Yi Fuxian glanced at Yan Shao, and a cold light flashed. He was very impressed with the place where he practiced for some time. Chapter 133. Up to you. Many disciples from the East China Sea Academy came to listen to the Wind Party. After Yun Tianhao, Yi Fuxian saw Zhuo King and Zhou Mu step onto the battlefield and defeat their opponents. Zhuo King and Zhou Mu were also geniuses in the same field. Zhou Mu is a holy disciple of painting, and Zhuo King is known as the first person in the field of law in the East China Sea. Just because of the Zibai Palace's first battle, Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life were full of strength. The East China Sea Academy has countless arrogance. The last day of the battle of the 10,000-year-old divine land in the South China Sea went without saying. Dare to call talent unrivaled. Time passed, listening to the battles one after another in the Wind Party, and it was dizzying. The four emperors chatted casually, and each sentence seemed to have a deep meaning and a secret confrontation. Yi Fuxian watched silently listening to the battle in the Wind Party, but was thinking about something else. Yi Tianzi had ordered people to look for Yi Xiang's predecessors, but Yi Xiang would not appear so easily because of his opposition to Wang Ming. How can I tell him that he is now next to the Kangyi kingdom? There was a burst of applause before listening to the Wind Party. As the battle of listening to the Wind Party continued, many great genius figures appeared, but Yi Fuxian didn't care about this. Gradually, the day was about to pass, but the huge crowd was unrelenting and still excited. At dusk, Hongxia appeared in the sky. The people who led the Wind Party looked at each other, nodded slightly, and then stopped after the battle. It was announced that the Wind Party would end here today and continue tomorrow. Many people have not enjoyed it, but they know that for 10 years, there will be a few days of listening to the wind. This is just the beginning, and it will be more and more interesting in the future. Many people saw the position of the emperor. Today, 4 emperors are here. For everyone, it was difficult for an emperor to see each other on weekdays. Only when listening to the Wind Party have the opportunity to see all 4 emperors at once. I'm afraid they brag for a long time. In the direction of the emperor's throne, the Yan emperor said, Emperor Luo invites us to come and observe the ceremony. Is there nothing else but to listen to the Wind Party? Chu Tianzi and Yi Tianzi's eyes also fell on Luo Tianzi, only to see Luo Tianzi smile and say, is Brother Yan already in such a hurry? In your free time, why is it important to watch the Tianzhou battle, and you rarely if we can be together? Later we will talk about spiritual practice together and confirm with each other to see if we can make any progress. Is it better than practicing alone? Luo Tianzi is not without reason. Chu Tianzi smiled. Therefore, let's go, Luo Tianzi said. What about them? Yi Tianzi asked, looking at the people behind him. Prince Luo Junlin will take him around, the juniors let him play alone, we are not comfortable with them. Luo Tianzi said. Yi Tianzi didn't say anything, then the 4 of them left without bringing anything. People, of course, they are the strongest of the 4 countries, and they don't need to bring guards. After the 4 emperors left, Prince Luo Junlin looked at the people with a smile, and said, you came from far away. I held a banquet at the 7-star lake in the King City, and entertained you. By the way, take a look at the scenery of the Nandu King's King City. Please. After saying that, he brought the 3 kingdoms lineage character forward, and Yi Fuxian followed, and the rest of his life stared at Luo Junlin's figure. That is, after he went to Donghai Zugong, his destination came from the East China Sea Wangcheng. On the other hand, Yi Fuxian was like nothing, as if he and Luo Junlin had never known each other, walking quietly. Behind them, there are many strong people to follow, all countries have. Among the people in front, there are not only Tianzhou descendants, but also princes or princesses. Several strong men, such as Kang Yiguo Jingyu, were also behind, but they only followed them from a distance without disturbing those people. Qixing Lake is not far from the royal palace, and is located in the center of King Nandu City. When night fell, the lake water was extraordinarily beautiful under the moonlight. Above the lake, there seemed to be a light, showing dimness. At this time, many people came to visit the lake. Among the 7-star lakes, there are 7 Heart Lake Islands, and the Lake Heart Islands are not big. At a glance, the 7 Heart Lake Islands are faintly in the direction of the 7 stars. This is the most famous 7-star restaurant in Wangcheng. At this time, the island in the middle of the lake has prepared a banquet, and many beautiful maids are already waiting there. It seems that they are well prepared. Banquets are placed in 4 directions. The people of the 4 countries, each according to one side. Prince Luo Jun of the Nandu Kingdom came to the main direction, and then said, please have a seat. Yi Fuxian, etc. Come to one of the prescription chairs and sit down. The others also took their own seats. There was an empty space between them, like a stage. A woman in a light gauze mask plays the piano. The piano sounds pleasant and moving in the moonlight. Through the hazy beauty. Then, a line of dancers came in and danced around the woman playing the piano. Here, someone in Qixing Lake looked at him from afar, knowing the identity of these people. Many cruise ship paintings came one after another, but none were too close, only from a distance. On the first night after listening to the Wind Feast, Prince Luo Jun's banquet invited the Tianzhou figures from the 3 neighboring countries, and they were vaguely expecting what would happen. You all came from far away, and you wouldn't be surprised if you didn't cheer up. Luo Junlin said lightly. Beauty is beautiful, and there is such a melody, it is difficult to talk about it. Yunku Youth Guo Jinyuafu said with a smile, it was not an intentional compliment. He didn't need it, and the environment here was great. Whether it's melody or beauty, among Kang Yeguo's people, they are far ahead of them. Luo Junlin chuckled, and many people saw the 3 beauties Kang Yeguo, Lin Yueya, Hua Jixin, and Yi Lingxi, all of them beautiful women. Lin Yueya, in particular, had a very good look, and they naturally noticed it. There are also women in Tianzhou from the Yunku Kingdom and Dian Kingdom, but their appearance is much inferior to the 3 beauties in the Kangai Kingdom. In the past, East China Sea Academy, I still remember the whole world. Luo Jun smiled openly, his voice fell, and his gaze looked at Yi Fuxian. Yi Fuxian put down his wine glass, looked up, and looked at Prince Luojun. As usual, Luo Junlin had Wang's arrogance on his face. Even today, looking at it, there is still a slight weakness, which seems to be a little fun. I'm taking back the words of the past. It seems inappropriate to give you the song, Yi Fuxian said with a smile. Whether it's given to me or not, it doesn't make a difference to me. The so-called Nandu Kingdom is nothing but a place. Luo Junlin spoke proudly, as if he didn't want to, and his goal was not the Nandu Kingdom. It's you. I'm giving you a chance then. If you grab it and help me, the next things might not happen. Perhaps this is your destiny. Yi Fuxian responded lightly, the two words were sharp. Luo Junlin thought that his follow-up deserved to regret Yi Fuxian, but Yi Fuxian said that it was Luo Junlin's fate. There he is. The people from the Yunku Kingdom and Dian Kingdom hearing the conversation between the two of them revealed interesting expressions. I didn't expect that the banquet was so interesting at first. Luo Junlin looked at Yi Fuxian, then laughed, do you want another song today? Yi Fuxian glanced at each other, raised a glass and drank, and ignored him. At this time, several figures came to this side. Luo Jun turned his eyes and saw Hua Xiang standing there, said, Your Majesty. What's wrong with Hua Xiang? Luo Junlin asked. It's nothing, I met His Majesty here, so I came to see them on their behalf. Hua Xiang pointed to the nearby Huxin Island. Luo Jun glanced over there, and saw Yan Shao leading the people from the East China Sea Academy and Nandu. Several family members were standing there, bowing to meet him. Yan Shao and Hua Xiang are naturally brothers. Needless to say, the Nandu family wanted to join Hua Xiang's line. No, Hua Xiang is busy, don't worry about this here. Luo Junlin responded lightly. Hua Xiang said goodbye, and glanced at Yi Fuxian. Yi Fuxian also glanced at Hua Xiang, and his eyes fell on another lake island. He had something and wanted to ask the people there. You are the first person Kang Yi Gafeng Y and Tianzi mentioned. At this time, a young man from the Dian Kingdom fell on Yi Fuxian and asked bluntly. Yi Fuxian looked at each other and smiled casually. I wonder how a man from a 7-star glory world won the first prize at the Fenghua party. Good luck, Tianzi looks pleasing to the eye, Yi Fuxian said. You believe. The youth from Dian State looked at the humanity of the Yunchu country. The young man in the Yunku costume of the Jinchu national costume smiled and said, You won't know if you try. Swallow battle. The big Yan Gorguo smiled and said, Aren't you willing to teach the strength of the first person on the Kangyi Guo Fenghua list? Yan Zan stood up, Luo Junlin waved and the dancers retreated. I am also a 7-star glory world. Yan Zan was standing there. He was burly, with an imposing gaze, looking at Yi Fuxian. I still have something I will not be accompanied. Yi Fuxian lowered the wine glass in his hand, then slowly stood up and walked out, but not towards the Yan battle, but towards the outskirts of the banquet. What do you mean? The people from Dian Kingdom looked at Yi Fuxian. Not interested. Yi Fuxian didn't look back. Is Kangai Goi Tianzi's vision so bad? Yan Zan said. Yi Danshan and Yi Lingxi both expressed anger, even questioning their father's vision. Yi Fuxian did not stop, and continued to walk, as if the matter here had nothing to do with him. Many people looked at his back and narrowed their eyes. Is this person avoiding war or underestimating war altogether? Fenghua is number one and must not avoid war, but if you underestimate and act like this, it will be too much. My entire life. In the distance, Yi Fuxian's voice came and said, You can do it. Okay. The rest of his life answered. Chapter 134, Can't live too long. For the rest of his life, he walked out of the Kangai Kingdom and immediately let their current eyes retreat from Yi Fuxian. Yanyan Guoyan's battle body is already very burly. His body is full of explosive power, but when the rest of his life stands out, Yanyan is half a head short, and the aura is instantly suppressed. This makes many people have a strange look, two big men fighting. Furthermore, ridicule appeared on the faces of the people from the Great Yan Kingdom. Yi Fuxian, the number one person in the ranking, may have some fears, but relying on Yan Zhan's combat strength, will he be afraid for the rest of his life? Fighting is not the stronger the body, the stronger it is. Yi Tianzi is a good person, and his vision is naturally good. The rest of his life looked at Yan Zhan and said. Yan Zhan looked at the man in front of him, sneered, and a sharp click came out. When he held his fist, he heard the sound, showing his strength. A low roar came out, and Yan Zhan appeared a terrifying demonic figure on his body. That's huge. Behind him, there is also the soul of life. It was a big green bull. Even though Yan Zhan is sure, he will not hate the opponent. What about your life? Yan struggled. You. He glanced at Yan for the rest of his life. He has never let go of his soul, let alone Yan against the same world. It seemed to feel the humiliation contained in the word, you, and Yan Zhan stepped out, the lake island seemed to tremble, and everyone had the illusion that many demon cows collided and rushed over. Dong. The earth shook, and the wine glasses in front of everyone trembled. The violent momentum made many people show a touch of surprise. This level of power makes people feel, even if standing in front of it is a mountain, which must be destroyed. The rest of the life stood still, and suddenly, an extremely wild breath came out of the rest of the life. Seeing Yan Zhan step forward and blast his fists at him, like an endless demonic cow hitting his body. The rest of his life took a step forward, with a loud bang, and then his fist broke, without fantasy. The two directly faced Hong with strength, and they naturally felt that the other party and themselves were the same. Bang! With a loud sound and no tension, the fist of the rest of life crushed Yan's battle, and then pounded on Yan's chest. In the next moment, everyone saw Yan Zhan's burly body flew backwards and directly hit Da Yan. Village crowd. But I saw the rest of my life stepping out, across space, directly grabbing Yan Zhan's body, clasping his chest, and lifting his body with one hand. This. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. This power is no longer a level. Don't look at yourself too high, you know. The rest of my life glanced at the crowd of Great Yan Kingdom, and then raised his hand and smashed Yan Yan's body into the crowd of Great Yan Kingdom. Yan Zhan's body was thrown flying, fiercely. Hit at the banquet, the great national strongman Yan wanted to catch him, and even brought him to the ground with him. The people of the Great Yan Kingdom were slightly dumbfounded, they knew Yan's battle power. It's a shame to destroy. From the rest of their lives, they feel the breath of the seven-star glory world, which is a battle with the world. The power is too weak. The rest of his life said a little disappointed, then walked back to his position, Yangguo's big black face strong. The first time I heard someone ridicule that Yan Zhan was too weak, but they didn't say something. The people of the Kangai Kingdom did not feel surprised. At the Fenghua banquet, they had seen the strength of their remaining lives. People in the country of France should avoid their superiority, let alone the same country. He can use power to shake phases, but he can't fly through the air. And all this was done by him without letting go of his soul. They don't believe that the monster for the rest of their life will not have a soul, it must have a hidden power. As for Yi Fuxian's departure, he did not look back, no matter what Great Yan country or Yunchu country, did he meet the world and the rest of his life. There isn't any. On another island in the heart of the lake, Yi Fuxian stepped forward to the banquet. At that moment, there was a lively laughter, and the atmosphere was much more lively than the Four Kingdoms. After all, here and there are different, everyone is here to climb the wall. But when Yi Fuxian came, the lively atmosphere was stagnant, and then there was silence. Everyone's eyes were on Yi Fuxian, almost everyone here knew Yi Fuxian. Hua Xiang, a few people from Zihai Palace from the East China Sea Academy, and people from the Nandu family. Not only do they know, but they are also enemies. If they could, they wouldn't mind removing Yi Fuxian on the spot, but if he followed the emperor of the Kangai Kingdom, Luo Tianzi would have already moved on, and naturally couldn't change them. Not to mention, not far away, a figure staring at this side, a strong person from the Kangai Kingdom. I haven't seen you in January, and your predecessors are very good. Yi Fuxian saw everyone staring at himself and suddenly smiled, but made everyone sting. This guy can really endure it. You are not dead, of course not very good. Hua Xiang was also polite, and said straightforwardly. When he was run away by Yi Fuxian, when he returned to Wangcheng, he was shaking, and the prince was angry. Even if he was a relative, he could not afford it. Looks like it was the junior's fault. Yi Fuxian smiled, and his eyes turned to the people of the Nandu family and Yan Shao. Where is the interpretation? Suddenly someone from the Nandu family asked. Didn't Hua Xiang tell you? Yi Fuxian is curious, others don't know the news, and Hua Xiang can't be stupid. He is beside Tianzi and often contacts the prince, and he is naturally an insider. The people in the Nandu family looked at Hua Xiang, and they looked at Hua Xiang indifferently towards the people in the Nandu family, and said, why? Are you still worried about your talented descendant of the Nandu family? Hua Xiangyin is serious, and we can't wait to catch her soon, the Nandu family said busily. Looking for it. The flower interpretation language is in the Kangai King Palace, and was captured as a princess by Yi Tianzi. Hua Xiang opened his mouth, and the face of the Nandu family suddenly became more beautiful. Hua Ziyu, captured as a princess in Kangai country. A month ago, Tianzi intended to reach the Nandu family, and they all hoped that Huajiayu could enter the palace as a prince, but Huajiayu was obsessed with Yi Fuxian and ran away with Yi Fuxian. In their view, Huajiayu is interested. The immature feeling is confused. However, in just 1 month, Huajiayu did not become the prince of the Nandu country, but became the princess of the Kangai country. The Nandu family's status in the Nandu kingdom became even more disgraceful because of that, and now it was shaking even more. Instead, one can imagine their mood. You didn't come to chat, did you? Hua Xiang asked indifferently. Yi Fuxian naturally did not come to chat. He looked at Hua Xiang and asked, where are my senior parents now? Hua Xiang looked at Yu Fuxian in surprise, but some of the accidents that Yu Fuxian asked him for were because of the dead. Never did Brother Fei change his life for you. Hua Xiang said weakly, looking at Yan Xiao, and he asked Yan Xiao to do it. You don't need to know. Yan Xiao said coldly. Yu Fuxian looked at Yan Xiao, and then he said, Shishi's parents liked Zivai Palace. He said that it was his home, so even after his death, he should be buried in Zivai Palace. You are careless. Yan Xiao said coldly, Zivai Palace is not a cemetery. It doesn't matter if you don't do this. I will transfer Shigong's parents and let him return to Zivai Palace. If I can't find Shigong's parents, I must let Zivaigong be buried together. Yu Fuxian spoke, he turned around and left in this way. Yan Xiao looked at his back, with a strong killing thought in his eyes, wanting to kill him on the spot. Yu Fuxian naturally knows that he is not the same, but now, they can't kill each other. Wait. At this time, a voice came out. Yu Fuxian stopped, turned around, and saw a young man staring at him, Yun Tianhao. I want to see your current strength. Yun Tianhao said coldly. Yan Xiao didn't say anything. From the moment Yun Tianhao entered the East China Sea Academy, he knew that Yun Tianhao would be the strongest talent in the East China Sea Academy's future. Man, this is a genius who has the care of heaven. As King City listens to the wind, Yun Tianhao will be able to show a shocking light. Yu Fuxian looked at Yan Xiao and the other people in Zivai Palace, and seemed to be looking forward to Yun Tianhao and his battle. Yu Fuxian, Qianhao's talent is not weaker than yours, Yan Xiao said proudly. With a faint smile in his eyes, Yu Fuxian looked at Yan Xiao and said, Is that so? You asked how much strength I had when he was defeated at my hands. At that moment, he only revealed the talent of the carver, and even the Destiny Mage talent was not revealed. Yan Xiao stared at Yun Tianhao when he didn't know, Yun Tianhao didn't tell him. That was before, and now it's not like before. Yun Tianhao looked indifferent. I don't have time to play with you again and again. Are you ready to fight? Are you ready to die? Yu Fuxian said coldly. Yun Tianhao's eyes were focused, and the strongman in Zivai Palace stared at Yu Fuxian. Arrogant enough to the extreme. Looks like you're not as confident as you think you are. Yu Fuxian smiled ironically, then turned away from this side. Many eyes stared at his back, his eyes were very cold. Yun Tianhao clenched his fists, and once defeated Yu Fuxian once in Qingzhou Zugong. Then, he thought he would throw out another, but after he arrived in Donghai City, I know that the name has long been known in the East China Sea, with twin souls and full talent, so even though he is proud, he does not have absolute confidence. Don't mind it, he can't live too long. Hua Xiang raised his glass and said quietly. Yan Xiao and others looked at Hua Xiang and nodded gently, but they knew in their hearts that the Wanghujing Emperor wanted to protect Yu Fuxian, thinking it was not easy to kill him. At this time, even outside, there is a very strong character guarding him. Killing is difficult to achieve. Chapter 135, Cold High. Yu Fuxian returned to the banquet, and the eyes of the people from the Yunchu Kingdom and the Dian Kingdom stared at him. Previously, they wanted to try Yu Fuxian's strength as the first person on the Kangyi Gafeng Huabang list, but Yu Fuxian did not come out, but came out with a punch in the rest of his life. This made him understand that Yu Fuxian was obviously not afraid of war, but completely underestimated him. The rest of life and Yu Fuxian are in the same environment, but the first place on the list is that Yu Fuxian is not the rest. Yan Zhan was crushed by the remnants of life. What is Yu Fuxian's level? At least 7 people in the world of glory want to deal with it, afraid that it is impossible. At today's banquet, Dian Guoshan said that a boring banquet like Fenghua Ban can't pick a really good genius. However, it doesn't seem so. The war just now proved something. Not someone else in Dian Guo, don't keep trying. In Yunchu country said again. Of course I will try, not only that, but I really want to know how strong the Mad Manchu prince who is known as the strongest prince of the descendants of the Yunchu kingdom is. A young man in Yanguo Day looked at the clothes of China Youth Road, eyes sharp and attractive. I heard about the Yanqi sword in the Yunku country, and Yanqi about the dual state of the French phase, but the sword cut a person who was 4 times that of the French phase. He was accepted as a godly son by the emperor of the great Yan kingdom and was given the surname Yan. The young man in the costume also smiled and said, the words of the two were opposite. Chu Quengren and Yanqi were the leaders of the Yunchu kingdom and great Yan kingdom, one of whom was a prince and the other became a prince. As the emperor of the great Yan kingdom said, the great Yan kingdom was hungry for talent. As long as the talent is extraordinary, there will be an opportunity to be named Hao and worship, and even the prince can seize it. Chu Quengren and Yan Qi's eyes collided in the void, both of them extremely sharp, as if they had an invisible and powerful gas field penetrating the banquet. At this time, Chu Madman smiled, and the momentum disappeared instantly. Listening that the wind party has just been held, Brother Yan doesn't have to be impatient, there will be an opportunity. Chu Quengren said lightly, unfortunately, the cultivation of the first person on the Fenghua list is too low, a little boring. If it is a law, it may be more interesting. Although they heard that Yi Fuxian defeated the character of the rule of law and the rule of law at the Fenghua banquet, they naturally looked down on the law that could win the seven-star glory nation. The seven talents of Chu Kuangren and Yan can defeat the descendants of Yun Chu and Da Yan, and their natural talent is undoubtedly unquestionable. However, fortunately, there is Yi Wuchen on the Fenghua list. Chu Kuangren paused for a moment and said, his eyes fixed on the figure sitting quietly across from him, said, Yi Wuchen, this session the person with the strongest Fenghua party ranks second on the Fenghua list. If it is not Yi Fuxian's cross-border war, the first one should be yours. I know a lot. Yi Wuchen lowered his wine glass, and then he looked at Chu Madman calmly. It is not difficult to understand these things. After all, Kangai Gafeng Wine's movement is not small. Chu Kuangren said, as a prince, the palace naturally has this information. If he wants to know, he can easily find out what battle is going on in Fenghuan. Although he didn't watch Feng Huan on the spot, from an intelligence perspective, there were two people who impressed him greatly, Yi Fuxian, a cross-border fighter, and Yi Wuchen, who was invincible. Of the two, Yi Fuxian's realm is too low, and he can't stand the flower. Yi Wuchen, he was clearly more interested. But I don't know you. Yi Wuchen responded immediately, letting the smile on the Madman Chu's face condense there. Yi Fuxian smiled slightly. Yi Wuchen is also an extraordinary person. Crazy man, it seems you are not famous enough. Yan Qi smiled. You are the same. Yi Wuchen said again. Yan Qi looked at Yi Wuchen in amazement. He only knows that Chu Kuangren is very arrogant, but does not want to see the more arrogant today. Yi Wuchen is not arrogant, but it is not easy for him to practice. Kendo also needs time to explore refinements. How can we waste time exploring the geniuses of Yunku and Dian? In other words, if you want to know who the power is, you will find out after the battle. Why is it so complicated? After all, it doesn't matter, you will know each other. Chu Madman smiled and then said to the people next to him, don't you want to see what Fa Feis can be defeated by the state of glory? Now the opportunity has come. The words fell, and someone from Yunku came out, looked at the Kangai kingdom, and said, I wonder if you can enlighten me. Bai Qiu and Yu Jiang were embarrassed. They only thought that the shame they lost to Yi Fuxian that day would spread in the Kangai kingdom and become an indelible stain, but they didn't expect that even the people in the surrounding kingdoms knew about it, and said they humiliated. Bai Qiu's figure came out. Even though he lost to Yi Fuxian, as Qin Zong's genius, he was definitely not weak, otherwise he would not be in the top spot. After losing to Yi Fuxian, he defeated several opponents and finally only then could he be named by the emperor. The two of them walked to the side, and the space in the middle of the banquet was definitely not big enough. Soon Qin Yin came out. Bai Qiu is Qin Zong Master Qin Zong's genius. His Qin Zong's magic was extremely powerful. Qin Zong is orthodox on Kang Yi Guakan Street, so he won't be famous. But in the end, Bai Qiu was defeated. The people from the Yunku kingdom were also the top geniuses of the younger generation. Just now the Yan battle of the great Yan country had been humiliated once, and was killed by a blow in the rest of his life. Of course, the Yunchu country would not make the same mistake, so he would fight Bai Qiu. In fact, they are very strong, and they are among the best talents in Yunku's youth. But Bai Qiu didn't know this. He only knew that he was defeated after being humiliated. At that time, Qin Zong's passionate young genius gradually lost his spirit. Then, the people from the Great Swallow Kingdom came to join in the fun and challenge Yu Jiang. Similarly, the people from the Great Swallow Kingdom defeated Yu Jiang firmly and dispelled the shame of Yan's defeat. The defeat of Bai Qiu and Yu Jiang seemed to confirm the words of the Yunchu kingdom. What Fa Feis can people in the world of glory beat? It seems that Kang Yi Gafeng is ranked first, and it doesn't seem as difficult as imagined. Chu Kuangren smiled and looked at Yi Fuxian. Yi Danshan and Yi Lingxi and the others looked at Yi Fuxian. With this tone, they couldn't swallow Kang Yeguo having lost 2 matches in a row. Even Bai Qiu and Yu Jiang both looked at Yi Fuxian, and if he did, he would at least let the people in Yunku and Dian know something. Yi Fuxian, as if he had not heard it, shouted, the rest of my life. Everyone fell silent, and they asked for the rest of their lives to fight. Yes, said the rest of his life. Yi Fuxian looked at the rest of his life, then stood up and smiled. I'm full, let's go. The rest of his life blinked and said, okay. With that said, the two of them really went straight regardless of the banquet. The strong people of the Yunku kingdom and the Dian kingdom looked at the two of them for a while. Too many people in their eyes. Chu Kuangren is proud, Yan Qi is also proud, Yi Wuchen is not much worse, but there is no one else, like Yi Fuxian. He doesn't mock or speak arrogantly, but completely ignores your existence. Luo Junlin held the wine glass, looked at Yi Fuxian's back, and there was no disguise in his eyes. Life and Soul twins, all attribute talents, are evil geniuses, but if he can grow, he has no chance. I'm also full, Yi Wuchen said, then got up. Therefore, we say goodbye. Yi Danshan said to Luo Junlin. The people from the Kangai kingdom stood up and left, and the people from the Yunku kingdom and the Great Yan kingdom looked at their backs, looking a little cold. 3 strong people came to watch the ceremony and listen to the wind party. When the wind party was over, I saw the difference. Chu Quengren said coldly, and then continued to drink without intending to leave. Luo Junlin heard a meaningful smile when he heard what he said, but he thought of something else. Yi Fuxian and his entourage left, and Lin Yueyao caught up with Yi Fuxian and walked to his side. Do you really care? Lin Yueyao's eyes stared at Yi Fuxian, becoming more and more curious about this man. Yi Fuxian looked at her, and had to say that Lin Yueyao, who was the first beauty of the Kangai kingdom, had a very good appearance. Although not as good as a fairy, she still had a touching beauty when she saw her up close. Guess. Yi Fuxian laughed. I wonder what's on your mind. Lin Yueyao smiled sweetly, otherwise you told me. Seeing that charming smile, Yi Fuxian smiled lightly. Beauty is useless to me, and you don't look as good as my fairy. Quote. Lin Yueyao stopped and looked at the man in front of her who was passing by, staring at her fiercely. The anger in the beautiful eyes was seen by Qiu and the others passing by, and his heart became even more jealous. Already. Is this still the first beauty of the cold country? He and Yi Fuxian, who is colder? When the party returns to the palace, they return to each other. When returning to the palace, Yi Fuxian saw a familiar shadow outside the palace. Seeing it immediately came to the front. There was a flash of light in the beautiful eyes. You're back. Lin Ziyu shouted with a smile. Yi Fuxian walked towards her, and everyone behind her looked at the beautiful woman. All of them looked strange. I remember when I arrived at the palace yesterday, a beautiful woman came, and is still the princess of the Nandu kingdom. The next night, a beautiful woman came to find him. Did he really escape from Nandu state to Kangai state? Lin Yueyao's eyes stared at the figures of the 2 people for a while and they fell silent. This woman's fate was a bit too good. Yi Danshan smiled, and looked at Yi Fuxian with admiration. Great, they whispered, and they returned to the palace. Only the rest of their lives did not leave, waiting by the side. Lin Ziyu, aren't you with someone from Donghai Zugong? Why are you here? Yi Fuxian asked. He saw Lin Ziyu among the crowd of Donghai Zugong during the day, guessing that he should be training in Donghai Zugong. Chapter 136, much more honest. Lin Ziyu's beautiful eyes looked at Yi Fuxian and looked at him closely. Compared to the first time he met him on the East China Sea ship, Yi Fuxian had grown a lot. He had become more handsome and outstanding, and he was no longer a teenager. Well, I'm practicing in Donghai Zugong, aren't you angry? Lin Ziyu smiled. What makes me angry? Yi Fuxian shook his head. He's not too narrow. He would remember the people in Zibai Palace firmly, but this matter had nothing to do with Donghai Academy, much less Donghai Academy. Ordinary student. You haven't told me why I'm here, can anyone? Yi Fuxian asked. Can I still see my friends? Lin Ziyu smiled gently. Yi Fuxian looked at her with a smile and nodded, of course. Actually, it's nothing. After seeing you at the wind party, I thought of coming to see you. I'm still worried about what happened in Donghai City. I didn't expect that you already have a foothold in Aoba country. With the Emperor's appreciation, it seems Bai is worried about you. Lin Ziyu said with a smile, generous and natural. Thank you. Yi Fuxian laughed. Have you heard of the leader of the Wakir Palace, Yi Zhang in Donghai City? Lin Ziyu laughed. Relax, Senior Yi Xiang should be fine. I asked my father. The strong man who helped you to chase the chase that day suffered some injuries, but he retreated safely, and he is not there. Hua Xiang. There is no news behind the main purpose of the event, and that should be fine. Yi Fuxian put his heart and knew that the old fox would not be so easy. Alright, come and say hello to you, I'll be back. Lin Ziyu smiled slightly. Yi Fuxian nodded. Pay attention to the safety on the road. Lin Ziyu nodded slightly, then walked away. Yi Fuxian looked at his back, then walked towards the palace. The rest of his life walking around, whispering, how many people are you trying to harm? What can I do if the face value is high? Yi Fuxian looked at the rest of his life with a smile, and his expression was a little cheap, as if he saw a gap. He rolled his eyes for the rest of his life and took direct big steps to leave. He didn't mean to give Yi Fuxian a chance. Yi Fuxian blinked, staring blankly at the rest of his life. Was his painting style wrong? Shouldn't he have proudly left? It's broken. Yi Fuxian muttered in a depressed mood. After returning to the courtyard, he did not rest, but practiced the piano to improve his mental strength. Ever since he stepped into practice, with experiences in life and mood swings, his desire for the realm grew stronger. In the past, in Qingzhou City, the hopes of his elder father, the path of the emperor, were more like a fantasy, but now he is actually pursuing. Time passed a little. Yi Fuxian was still playing in the middle of the night. There seems to be a lot of emotion in the song. He returned to his native country, Nandu country, but his identity had changed. He came to observe the ceremony with Yi Tianzi. Dream with a piano sound resounding in the quiet space, a violent aura appeared in the surrounding heaven and earth, blending into Yi Fuxian's body, but he still played as if he didn't feel it. The depth gradually became high, showing a sense of immovability, and the aura around him was even louder, dancing to the sound of the piano. This situation seemed to last a long time. When the last note fell, like thunder on the ground, the surrounding aura screamed into his body frantically. With his eyes open and flickering, Yi Fuxian smiled. The mage realm broke through and set foot in the 8-star glory world. After breaking the border, he still didn't go to rest, but continued to practice martial arts. Strong mental strength can increase one's willpower and help to practice martial arts. The fist roared. Yi Fuxian spurred the emperor's tactics. The blood on his body seemed to growl. His body seemed to have the will of the emperor, and after breaking through his spiritual power, his martial arts seemed more refined, and his body changed all the time. When the first ray of dawn appeared on Yi Fuxian's body, he stared at the roar and punched forward, as if there was a burst of sound. The void seemed to tremble, the incomparable impressive momentum erupted fiercely from above his body, and the virtual shadow of the dapping real dragon bloomed from head intention. Above his body, there was a faint virtual shadow ape god. The martial arts meaning in his body was extremely powerful. Budao broke the ground. Yi Fuxian smiled, and both Master and Wudao broke through the night. Yi Fuxian exhaled, so he stopped practicing, then went to wash his body, and the sky gradually brightened. Today, it will be the second day of listening to the wind party. Many people in King Nandu City will gather towards the south gate of the palace. Yi Fuxian, they walked with Yi Tianzi and the others today. On the way, Yi Tianzi shouted Yi Fuxian. Yesterday in the palace, Luo Tianzi asked me to ask someone again. Yi Tianzi said. Yi Fuxian was calm when he heard it. If Yi Tianzi had to give it up, he would have already given up. Not to mention that Yi Tianzi admired him. As far as the hostile status of the two countries is concerned, Luo Tianzi asked Yi Tianzi to ask someone, can he pay it? This makes the world look at him. He knew it was impossible, but he mentioned it over and over again, and from his tone, I felt very confident, like listening to what might happen to the party. Yi Tianzi continued. Yi Fuxian frowned slightly. Leaving him, Luo Tianzi invited the Emperor of the Three Kingdoms to come watch the ceremony, which seemed a bit unusual. Is Luo Tianzi likely to join Yunku and Dian? Yi Fuxian asked softly. Impossible. Yi Tianzi shook his head. The relations between the four countries are already fragile, and there is no reason for Yunku and Dian to join him. Although there is constant friction between kingdoms, each has its own bottom line, and the Emperor will not easily take action unless something special causes war. The battle of the Emperor is a trivial matter. Once it cannot be collected, no one will be able to bear the consequences. But guessing seems futile. Wait and see. What kind of trust does Luo Tianzi have? Yi Tianzi shook his head with a smile, and the group slowly came to the place where the wind party was being held. It sank, but when Yi Tianzi and his entourage arrived, the figure who was in the void couldn't help but make a way. Many people watched Yi Tianzi closely. The king of the Kangai kingdom didn't know how strong it was. If the emperors of the four kingdoms could fight in one battle, it would be very interesting. Of course, they also knew that it was impossible. These women are very beautiful. Someone looked at Lin Yueyao behind Tianzi again, like a fairy, and couldn't help but be amazed. That person is Yi Fuxian. He is from Donghaifu, our country in the southern Dao kingdom. He betrayed the kingdom and turned to the Kangai kingdom, but it is said that his talent is extraordinary. Someone pointed at Yi Fuxian and said quietly that the Emperor of the Three Kingdoms came to attend yesterday's ceremony. Many people asked about who they brought and also heard some news. The people from the Yunchu kingdom and the Dian kingdom have arrived. When Yi Tianzi arrived, the eyes of many people like Chu Quengren and Yan Qi fell on Yi Fuxian. The genius who was ranked first in the Kangai national Fenghua ranking yesterday did not play, but still impressed them. Luo Tianzi also brought people. The emperors of the four kingdoms came together to listen to the wind party. Yesterday, I invited you to the party. Did the descendants of Tianzhou exchange each other? Luo Tianzi asked with a smile. Some of them were a little curious. They accidentally asked what happened yesterday. I have fought several people on the Fenghua list. As expected, being able to be defeated by the people of the glory world is indeed a little inconvenient, but after all, Kangai Gefenghuaben once every 3 years can have this fighting power. This is enough good, Chu Quengren said with a smile, and anyone could hear the arrogance contained in that dull voice. Bai Qiu and Yu Zhang's faces darkened again. Can they scream inwardly for saying this? Da Yangguo also seems to have lost it, Bai Qiu said coldly. It can only be said that the top 3 of the Fenghua list seem to still have some strength. Yan Qi said coldly. Yan lost the rest of his life, and for the rest of his life, Fenghua's list was 3rd. Yi Wuchen is the strongest person on the Kangai national Fenghua list, and doesn't want to discuss with him. See what kind of character can be born at this banquet, Chu Quengren said again. Where is the first person in Fenghubang? Luo Tianzi said with a smile. He mentioned Yi Fuxian as if he didn't know it. Of course, he didn't know Yi Fuxian. Is Fenghua number one? Chu Madman smiled slightly. I don't know if I am really proud, or if I use arrogance as an excuse to hide from the war. Chu Madman naturally implies that Yi Fuxian pretends to be proud, and avoids a frontal battle. If he didn't fight, naturally no one would be able to see at what level Yi Fuxian's strength was. Although he proved himself at the Fenghua party, only Yi people from Tianzi and Kangai Kingdom saw that the people here were the best geniuses in each country. Many people's eyes were on Yi Fuxian including Lin Yueyao and Bai Qiu. Since last night, Madman Chu has always been provocative. Does he remain indifferent? Yi Fuxian was still sitting there, watching the battle on the 9 fronts in front of him, ignoring the provocation of the madman. Everyone was a little speechless. This guy. Don't you have anything to say? Chu Quanggren continued to stare at Yi Fuxian. When Yi Fuxian saw the other party looking a bit reluctant, he looked at Chu Quanggren, just one glance, he looked at the battle platform again, indifferent. Quote. Everyone was a little taken aback. Is the battle on this platform so exciting? Many people followed Yi Fuxian's eyes. It was a platform for the glory of Joxing, and Zhou Mu of Donghai Zugong was fighting there. His name is Zhou Mu, and he used to be very self-righteous. Yi Fuxian watched Zhou Mu suddenly speak, and when everyone heard him, he looked at him, and saw Yi Fuxian smiling. Then, he was beaten with a stick. Chapter 137, The Hanging King's Shrine. Yi Fuxian's words fell, and everyone around him looked at him in surprise, dumbfounded. This Kangai Fenghubang's best friend is strong and arrogant. But it sounds cool. Even Bai Qiu's eyes to see Yi Fuxian are pleasing to his eyes, and he thinks that he doesn't think of himself as an example. If Zhou Mu on the battle platform heard this, he would not know if he would vomit blood. Yi Tianzi's eyes blinked. He was named number 1 on the Fenghua list and was very individual. The people of the Yangkou Kingdom and Dian Kingdom were all there, and I saw Yi Fuxian's eyes still looking at the battle platform. He did not mention the Dao name and responded positively to the Chu madman from beginning to end. The eyes of several emperors couldn't help but look at Yi Fuxian, especially the emperor of Yangkou country. Chu madman is his son. He knew nothing about the strength of a junior in a state of glory. Of course, as the son of heaven, naturally he will not be involved in the junior debate, but Yi Fuxian's words are a bit embarrassing. After being stunned for a while, the madman sneered, said, Genius has arrogance, which is not surprising, but if you're like this, it is only a noble realm that dares to be so vocal. I have never seen it before, but it is ridiculous that if you being in the realm of law, I don't mind teaching you how to be a person. Yi Fuxian looked at Chu Quanggren with a faint smile on his face, and said, well, if you have the opportunity, I will ask you for advice. Wait until you get into legal status. Chu Quanggren turned his eyes and didn't look at Yi Fuxian anymore. His real name was not called Chu Quanggren, but Chu Quanggren's name was more famous than his real name, so everyone forgot about it. His real name could be seen from Chu Quanggren's madness. However today, Chu Quanggren can be considered an opponent. After waiting for the Wind Party to come out, give it a try and you will know. Yan Qi said coldly, and Yi Fuxian said that he had the urge to provoke him, but he compared the madman to the one he used to lie down with. The opponent then became more honest. Although Zhou Mu's talent on the platform is fine, how can he compare to the crazy Chu? This is the most talented Tianzhou in the Yangkou younger generation. Yi Fuxian shook his head secretly. He was not interested in this. Defeating the geniuses of Yun Chu and Dian Guo seemed to gain nothing but letting others sigh on their own strength, and on the contrary, it might stir up enmity. He didn't need to prove anything to the other party. Last night, Chu madman provoked him and returned straight away, too lazy to bother. That is indeed a person who dares to disobey my orders. Luo Tianzi smiled slightly and said, Yi Fuxian. Yi Fuxian's gaze flashed sharply, then his body turned slowly. His eyes fell on Luo Tianzi's body. Distinctive temperament, arrogant eyes, all over his body revealed the temperament of the king, and he did not see that he usurped the throne and turned his life into the throne. For more than 300 years, he has become accustomed to his identity. He is the king of the Nandu kingdom, a unique king. That's why he was so strong. Without any respect, he took out 2 very arrogant wills. If you follow my will and come to Wangcheng that day, maybe I will give you a chance. Why do you have to run away for a lifetime, and the future is also ruined? Will you regret the decisions you made in the past? Luo Tianzi suddenly asked directly, without any cover. Yi Fuxian looked at Luo Tianzi. Just as Yi Tianzi said, he looked very confident, as if he had decided for himself. But this belief, I don't know where it came from. After making a decision, how can I regret it? Yi Fuxian responded calmly. You're right. Luo Tianzi smiled and said, before there is no way out, how do you know how to repent? This Nandu country is my world, what I mean is God's will, and you forcibly disobey me. It is against the fate of destiny, and what can be changed even if the king's life count was as predicted by Zhao Xiang. Several emperors looked at Luo Tianzi in amazement, and then looked at Yi Fuxian. The first person in Fengyuan actually has the number of kings. Yi Fuxian was calm when he heard these words, but it was a bit strange why Luo Tianzi would say these words at this time, and his words were filled with great pride. But Yi Fuxian himself knows that if Zhao Xiang measures his own life, it is not only Wang's life. He glanced at Zhao in the direction of Luo Tianzi, and saw Zhao sitting quietly, as if he really didn't care about foreign affairs. If your majesty is happy, feel free to say anything. Yi Fuxian smiled and did not oppose Luo Tianzi. Now he doesn't have the strength to summon Pan Luo Tianzi. Even if you really have the life of a king and can read to my son, it is your luck. Luo Tianzi continued to say, unfortunately, you don't know to cherish the opportunity. Yi Fuxian did not answer. Everyone in Nanduguo knew that Luo Tianzi really liked Prince Luo Junlin. When he was a child, he was crowned prince. He will inherit the throne in the future. Since he had such talent, Luo Tianzi's father naturally trusted him greatly. Prince Luo Junlin was born a few years early, otherwise this child can also learn from him. Emperor Yun Chuguo looked at Chu Man in front of him, and he was equally confident in his son. Is that true? Luo Tianzi smiled, and there seemed to be some disdain in his voice, and Chu Tianzi did not refute it. Listening to the Wind Party continues to be held, and the strong ones continue to appear, and some of them are very talented. At noon, several people left, the sun was bright, and the atmosphere of listening to the party did not diminish. At this time, the eyes of several emperors suddenly turned and looked in the direction of the Nandu royal palace. Some of the emoticons look weird. Someone dared to borrow a road from the Nandu royal palace. They're still listening. When the party was held, some of the emperors of the Nandu kingdom were not considered. The three Yi Tianzi looked at Luo Tianzi, but they saw a dazzling light in each other's eyes, staring at the palace, as if waiting for something. A dazzling array of brilliance shot to the side like the sun, and immediately descended into the sky. There was a whistling sound in the void. Many people who listened to the Wind Party looked into the void, and their hearts were slightly shocked. The four sons of heaven are here. Dare to be so rude. Listen to the Wind Party for a while, and all retreat from the battle platform. At this time, Luo Tianzi stood up and said loudly, his voice shaking directly on the 9 battle platforms, making the hearts of those warriors fight. He trembled, and did not dare to oppose Luo Tianzi's intentions. Above the void, 3 figures stood proudly, and the sun shone on them, reflecting bright light. They stood above the 4 great emperors, but they were as if they were fine, as if they should, and a proud and indifferent expression took the emperor below on the banquet to listen to the wind at all. Lord Yi Tianzi, Chu Tianzi, and Yan Tianzi all flashed dazzling light in their eyes. There were even 3 prince figures who descended into the Nandu kingdom. No wonder the other party ignored everything and walked over from the top of the palace. Too scary, the breath of these 3 people is stronger than them. While they were shocked, they were a little confused, which kingdom could send such a terrible line in the land of hundreds of countries in the east. As for the large crowd, they were even more curious. For them, the prince was a prince, a rare encounter. The strength of these 3 people seems to be above the prince, and dares to ignore the prince's character. What's in there? Where is Luo Jun's presence? The man's head said. Luo Tianzi's eyes lit up, and finally came, faster than he expected. Luo Jun stood up, holding his fist slightly, and there seemed to be a touch of deep joy in his eyes, but his steps were still steady, walked towards the void, then stopped, and looked at the 3 figures above him, said, Luo King Lin met the seniors. Let's see. The figure in the void continued. Luo Junlin nodded, and then under everyone's shocking gaze, Luo Junlin released a terrifying momentum, a golden light spilled through the void, and his body bloomed. The king was impressive. At this moment, Luo Junlin is like a young prince and cannot live forever. Wang Haoyai, Yi Tianzi and the other 3 trembled, and they all stood up and looked up at the sky. Some things were vaguely guessed. At this moment, Yi Tianzi seemed to understand where Luo Tianzi's confidence came from. He suddenly sent Luo Junlin to that place. Moreover, Luo Junlin succeeded, which means that Luo Junlin has extremely terrifying talent. He won the prince's fortune in the trials of the ancient world. We are from the palace of the Obergirid kings in the eastern wasteland. Do you want to join my sect? Luo Jun bowed, looking quite respectful, saying, the younger generation is willing. Okay, will you go with us now, or will you go alone in the future? The strong man in the void asked again. There are still things for young people to deal with. I will leave in a few days. Luo Junlin replied. Yes. Void Strong nodded, and then gave an ancient order, saying, this is the suspended king's order. If you put spiritual energy into it, we can know your life and death. From then on, you will become the suspended king palace. The disciples under the door, within 3 months, came to the king's palace. Yes, senior, Luo Junlin bowed. Farewell. The strong man in the void nodded, and then the 3 of them walked straight into the sky and turned into a few lights. From start to finish, none of them looked at the 4 emperors. It was as if in their eyes, the divine child who was above the heavens was not even qualified to give him a glance. Seniors go slow, shouted Luo Jun bowing. The three emperors of Yi Tianzi looked at Luo Junlin, and there was a violent wave in their hearts, which were extremely restless. The Hanging King's palace was a powerful force from a remote place in the middle of the eastern wasteland. Chapter 138, Bad Ancient World. Around the battle platform, countless figures stared at Luo Junlin in the void. Although they didn't know what the Palace King's strength was, they saw Luo Tianzi and Luo Junlin's attitude. The Hanging King Temple should be a powerful force far above Nandu State. Crown Prince Luo Junlin was favored by the Palace of the Suspended Kings and was accepted as a disciple. This was truly an evil genius of peerless Nanduguo. Congratulations, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. At this moment, Hua Xiang stood up and bowed to Luo Tianzi and Luo Jun. Many princes and nobles of the Nandu Kingdom stood up and worshipped. Gradually, the crowd in the Wind Party also worshipped and congratulated. For a time, the mountain screamed a tsunami and the scene was spectacular. Among the crowd, the people from the Zihai Palace and the Nandu family from the Donghai Learning Academy were slightly surprised, especially those from the Nandu family. They knew more about the Eastern Wasteland and understood what it meant. Their ancestors died in the ancient world. Many young junior characters are full of jealousy and admiration when they see the prince, but Lin Ziyu's eyes are staring at Yi Fuxian. Now the prince seems to worship the powerful sex of the outside world. His power is above the kingdom. That light can a bright handsome figure compete with him in the future? The emperors and geniuses of the three kingdoms looked at this scene quietly. At this moment, the three emperors understood that this was the reason why Luo Tianzi asked them to come and observe the ceremony. Luo Tianzi waved at the people and laughed. When the listening party is held, it is really a celebration to have a happy event. I will be rewarded for the best talented person listening to the party. Please continue. Thank you, Your Majesty. Everyone smiled, listening to the party continue. His Majesty went to the palace of the Suspended Kings to train and endure the king's wish, and he will definitely become a king again in a few years, Hua Xiang said with a smile. Slap the horse. Although Prince Luo Junlin is already a top figure in the realm of the French phase, but there is still a realm in the sky. How many years do you want to be a prince? Are you crazy? However, he won the Houi King in the ancient world, and he will train in the Hanging King Palace and become a king. It's only a matter of time. Congratulations to brother Luo. Chu Tianzi and Yan Tianzi also congratulated. Although they were a little jealous, they still had to give face. After Luo Junlin became a prince, the Nandu Kingdom had two prince figures, and Luo Jun was in suspension. The king's palace might train to a higher level than them, then, the Nandu royal family can no longer offend. You're welcome. Luo Tianzi smiled, and then his eyes fell on Yi Tianzi. How does Yi Tianzi feel? Luo Tianzi asked with a smile. Good luck. Yi Tianzi smiled casually. He thought, if Yi Fuxian is also a peak cultivation law, if he sacrifices himself the opportunity to send Yi Fuxian to the ancient world, can he give Yi Fuxian a chance? However, Yi Fuxian's cultivation was too weak. In places like the desolate and ancient realm, I am afraid that it is difficult to make achievements and that high talent is useless. Luck. Luo Tianzi smiled sinisterly. My proposal Yi Tianzi should reconsider. Maybe I refused before. I can pretend it never happened. Speaking of his eyes, he glanced at Yi Fuxian, apparently trying to force Yi Tianzi to make a man. If you trust Luo Junlin so much, why do you keep asking someone? Yi Tianzi looked at Luo Junlin and said, in other words, you don't really believe in Luo Junlin, that Luo Junlin is not as good as Yi Fuxian. Joke. Luo Tianzi sneered. Since you are so determined, just wait. Luo Jun glanced at Yi Tianzi, then his eyes fell on Yi Fuxian's body, and there was a hint of disdain in his eyes. Yi Fuxian didn't care about Luo Junlin's gaze, and he didn't know the Hanging King Palace. Regardless of whether Luo Junlin joined the Hanging King Palace, as long as he couldn't threaten himself for a while, what had that got to do with him? It's just a little harder to kill him later. At this time he was thinking about something else. Before Luo Junlin released Wang Haoyai, he was somewhat familiar. During life and death in Donghai City, the will of the emperor appeared in his body, and he taught the tactics of the emperor. Then, when he used the emperor formula, the emperor would appear in his body. He wondered if this emperor's intent and the prince's will released by Luo Junlin belonged to the same category. I didn't expect it. At this time, remaining next to Yi Fuxian, Zhao Qianfan said, Nandu Guo is afraid that two princes will be born. That will be the future, Hua Jixin whispered softly. Be prepared, if that day really comes. Kang Yeguo is afraid that there will be a crisis. Zhao Qianfan glanced at Yi Fuxian and said, do you have any feelings? People don't respond. Many people looked at Yi Fuxian, but heard the rest of his life coldly say, this is just a matter of the future. Even if we wait until that day, are we not advancing in our practice? Just like you, there is a genius. First name. Arrogant. Zhao Qianfan said coldly, do you know what prince means? It's just practice, is it strong? The rest of his life staring at him. People in Fenghubang look at the rest of their lives, and look at his eyes without fear. Seeing such eyes, they seem to know the rest of life again. To this person, the prince only means the state of practice. To many, a prince meant a son of heaven, unique and unrivaled in the world. Zhao Qianfan looked at the rest of his life, and suddenly smiled, this clueless man. Yi Tianzi was also interested in the quarrel between the two of them. He stared hard into the eyes for the rest of his life and smiled, yes, that's right, Prince, one of the fields of practice. You are all on the list. Does Wang Hujing have faith? When Zhao Qianfan saw that Tianzi also helped the rest of his life, he was speechless. Although there is nothing wrong with Tianzi's words, he understands that it is not easy for a prince to set foot, and it is not always a high talent. This is impossible for most people. Your Majesty, where do those people come from, and where is the ancient world? At this time, Hua Jixin asked, and these fathers did not tell him. Since I have contact today, I will talk to you. Yi Tianzi said when he heard Hua Jixin's question. Suddenly Kang Yi Kingdom's eyes fell on him, obviously very curious. Neither the Kangai Kingdom nor the Nandu Kingdom belong to the Eastern Wasteland, and not only that, the Eastern Wasteland is endless. Although I am a prince, I don't know how vast the Eastern Wasteland is. Only the area where we live is said to be there are hundreds of countries, called Wasteland the East and the 100 Kingdoms, which make up a vast territory, but the land of the 100 nations is not in the middle region of the Eastern Wasteland. Yi Tianzi slowly said, in the middle region of the Eastern Wasteland, there are countless superpowers. In our land of 100 countries, the strongest prince in the realm can become a king, called Tianzi, but in the middle region of the Eastern Wasteland, the power there are few princes, and the top forces are more. The Hanging King Palace that came earlier is a very famous power in the Eastern Wasteland. Everyone's heart was shocked. The outside world was much wider than they had imagined. The land of 100 countries is just a place in the eastern desert. Only then did they understand what was contained in Luo Junlan's discourse yesterday. It means, where is the barren ancient realm? Is it the secret of the trial? Lin Yueya said. Not. Yi Tianzi shook his head. The so-called trials are for the people of our country of 100 countries, but in fact, the ancient world is the real world, where the land of fortune and the place where princes are born from ancient times to modern times. People in our land of 100 countries want to set foot in the realm of the prince, and they must enter the ancient realm to capture the fortune of the prince, so that the prince will be born in their body to break the barrier of the prince. Unfortunate luck has created many rare things, even rare monsters. Many of the top sectarian powers in the Eastern Wasteland sent disciples to build ancestral gates in the ancient and ancient realms. For countless years, the ancient and ancient realms have long been the same as outside world. There is the Zongmen Kingdom, the secret place of the city. Why haven't we heard of such a place? Lin Yueyao whispered. The people in the land of the 100 nations cannot freely enter and leave the ancient and ancient realms. Only the princely figures have the opportunity, and the ancient and ancient realms have two upper and lower realms. For the people in the lands of hundreds of countries, opportunity to enter the ancient desert is very rare, but Luo Tianzi gave Luo Junlan a chance, and sent him to the ancient desert to win a fortune. Everyone listened carefully, and roughly understood what the place in the ancient and ancient world was, and was slightly shocked in their hearts. Yi Fuxian listened quietly, and suddenly he thought of something else. On the hill of King Kangai, the state teacher said that he had followed His Majesty the Nandu Kingdom to go to court, and now Luo Tianzi, the king of the Nandu Kingdom, is suffering sneaking into Luo Tianzi for good luck. Could you go to the wilderness? He has a feeling this is most likely true. Luo Tianzi changed his life in ancient times, so he tried to send his son Luo Junlan to ancient times to change his life. At this time, Luo Junlan also succeeded. He lost luck in the ancient world and was considered a disciple by the strong in the king's palace. In addition, the ancient desert is still the road leading to the eastern desert, and the army of the great gates in the eastern desert is guarding this main entrance. Yi Tianzi said again, certificate well, when you step into the peak of the French realm, perhaps I will consider sending you to the ancient and ancient realms. There are genius figures from the top forces in the east and the wilderness. Although I have never been to the ancient and ancient realms, it must be a beautiful little world. Yi Tianzi smiled. Listening to the Wind Party continues, the enthusiasm of the people in the Nandu Kingdom is soaring, with the constant appearance of geniuses, sometimes the sound of mountains and tsunamis. The heavens of the Kangai Kingdom are slightly absent-minded. The Tianzhou person who always thought that he lived in the center of the kingdom, but suddenly discovered that there was a more interesting world outside, and his mood fluctuated inexorably. I want to go to a small world where talent gathers in the eastern wasteland. Chapter 139, Biplane. After the second day of listening to the Wind Party, Luo Tianzi did not invite Yi Tianzi anymore. Now, whether it is Luo Tianzi or Luo Junlan, it is only when the spring breeze is proud. As soon as the banquet sounded, many people like Hua rushed to the prince's side. To celebrate Prince Luo's visit, many princes and noble figures of the Nandu kingdom agreed. They all understood that Prince Luo would not inherit the throne of the Nandu kingdom after he stepped into the temple of the deferred kings, and there would be an even more dire future. If he could become a great figure in the temple of the suspended kings, then Mo was said to be Nandu. This is the land of hundreds of countries, which is enough to side with, and even to build a stronger empire. In the land of the 100 nations, several powerful kingdoms were born this way, as more than one princely figure appeared. The people of the Kangai kingdom naturally didn't go to have fun, they already knew that Luo Tianzi invited them to come to wait for this moment, rather than just inviting them to watch the ceremony. Yi Danshan was even annoyed to want to return to the Kangai kingdom, but Yi Tianzi did not agree. Now that he came to watch the ceremony, of course he must wait until the end of the Wind Party, otherwise it will not make people laugh at him as the emperor, and jealous of Luo Junlin. Back in the palace, Yi Fuxian found that the rest of his life seemed to be sulking in his head, and couldn't help but ask, "What happened to you?" Not happy. The rest of his life looked up. Because Luo Jun came to the palace of the suspended kings. Yi Fuxian laughed. Not only that, the father and son deliberately invited people from the three kingdoms to come to attend the ceremony, not just to show off. I really think that Luo Junlin was given unique talents. Said the rest of his life. Others can naturally enter the Tenshin King Temple, and naturally have some talent. Yi Fuxian smiled. Regardless of what the King Palace is, he will not intervene when he kills Luo Junlin in the future, and dare to intervene and die together. The rest of his life was a little irritable. Yi Fuxian looked at him shyly. Is this man in the realm of glory and wants to destroy the great powers of the East? The rest of my life being irritable. Don't think about it, go practice, we won't go to listen to the Wind Party tomorrow. Yi Fuxian said for the rest of his life. Do not go. The rest of his life stared at Yi Fuxian. Well, don't you feel bored? Yi Fuxian smiled for the rest of his life. On the last day, just go and see. After hearing Yi Fuxian's words, his eyes shone for the rest of his life, and then he seemed to understand something, he smiled, and seemed to feel much better. Yi Fuxian glared at him, then turned to practice. One night passed and Yi Lingxi came to call them the next day. Yi Fuxian told him that he wasn't ready to leave yet. Yi Tianzi knew that he would stay in the palace to take care of Yi Fuxian. He took the others alone to attend the Wind Party. Yesterday, the king of the king's palace came, and the royal prince of Nandu was accepted as a disciple by the king of the king's palace. The news that he would become the second prince of the southern king's kingdom had spread throughout the night. Luo Tianzi was naturally in a good mood. Hearing the Wind Party continue, he noticed that Yi Fuxian did not come, and the Yangku and Dian people also naturally noticed. The first person on the Fenghua list, it is only necessary to avoid the previous war. Is there anyone hiding now? Chu Quangren did not see the sarcasm in Yi Fuxian. You are wrong. At this point, just listening to Yi Wuchen say, he should be bored, the party is boring, and the people are boring. I knew I wouldn't be here today. Of course, that's a very good reason. You and Yi Fuxian are similar. Chu Quangren said lightly. Maybe it was stimulated yesterday. Several people in Dianguo also smiled. Even though it was a feast for the wind, the person who shone the brightest yesterday was undoubtedly Luo Junlin. Many people have waves in their hearts. Inquire about news about the eastern wasteland and the ancient world. Your Majesty, I won't be here tomorrow, Yi Wuchen told Yi Tianzi. Okay. Yi Tianzi nodded. What do you want to let go of? Chu Quangren smiled at Yi Wuchen. Rest assured, I will come to the final battle day of the party. Yi Wuchen replied, and Chu Madman looked at him with a smile and said, okay, I'm looking forward to it. Ellipsis. As Yi Wuchen said, on the fourth day of listening to the feast, he did not appear. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life did not appear. Not only on the fourth day, with the holding of the listening party, geniuses continue to appear, and the atmosphere will soon be pushed to the top, but Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life have never appeared in the seats by Yi Tianzi's side. Even the people of Takai Zugong Palace and Nandu family also noticed that it was probably because His Majesty was seen by the large army and stimulated Yi Fuxian, although Yi Fuxian's talent was terrifying, no less than Prince Luo Luolin. However, training depends not only on talent, but also luck. Yi Fuxian seems destined to be incomparable to the prince. After Prince Luo Jun came to the palace of the suspended king, Yi Fuxian will never be allowed to grow up. These days, Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life had been training in the palace. Especially for the rest of his life, he is in a completely unhappy state of retreat, and every time Yi Fuxian goes to see that he is in a state of practice, he does not bother. In the palace, Yi Fuxian was in the courtyard where Yi Fuxian practiced boxing. The emperor would flow in his body, making each stroke like a beautiful artistic conception. With practice, this charm is increasing and increasing. Obviously, it can be used more freely in attacks. A deep roar interrupted Yi Fuxian's practice, which was the voice of the rest of his life. Yi Fuxian's heart tightened, and he ran somewhere in the courtyard, and immediately came to the spiritual practice site for the rest of his life. Looking at the rest of his life at this moment, Yi Fuxian twitched violently. Every time he looks at the practice of the rest of his life, he feels a heartache, like a needle. There was a terrible atmosphere around the rest of his life at this moment, and his dark golden luster surrounded his body, and he completely buried his body in it. On the body of the rest of his life, there was a figure like a demon. The dark gold imagination turned into a terrifying vortex, devouring all the surrounding violent aura, making thorns on the body of the rest of the life. Then, Yi Fuxian saw the rest of his life behind him, and in the flesh and blood body, there was a bulge that grew and extended outward. It was for this reason that the rest of his life could not stand the painful exclamation. At this moment, he closed his eyes tightly and his lips were tightly shut. To prevent himself from making a sound, his lips were bitten and bleeding. Startling. Yi Fuxian's hands were tightly clenched, making a clicking sound. Why would righteous father let the rest of his life practice such a cruel practice? The ghost-like image of a demon continued to condense and bulge out. Ah! It was another terrible cry, as if it was extremely painful. Boom! There was a roar, and the wind was so strong that it seemed to break. After the bulge behind the rest of the life grew, it turned into a pair of terrifying wings, and the dark golden wings shone with a terrifying light. Above the feathers, there are sharp dangling thorns. This pair of wings is very large, and fits perfectly with the burly body of the rest of life. If Yi Fuxian's golden-winged dapping bird's wings are blooming like divine feathers, then the rest of the wings of life are blooming like demon feathers, which are trembling. Does the work method produce itself? Yi Fuxian's heart trembled, his wings were born, and the lack of the rest of his life was insurmountable. The violent aura between the heavens and the earth around him flowed into the rest of his life. Just a metallic aura, and wind. Yu Yixing, he even gave birth to a wind attribute Talon. At this moment, the eyes of the rest of his life opened, and a terrifying golden light bloomed from his pupils, exuding an extremely cruel atmosphere. However, when he saw Yi Fuxian's figure in front of him, the violent atmosphere disappeared instantly, and the violent meaning on his body gradually recovered as usual. I saw the rest of my life smiling deeply at Yi Fuxian, like a big boy, without the previous terrifying violent momentum. Doesn't it hurt? Yi Fuxian asked softly. This little thing is still bearable. I am now in 8-star glory. The rest of his life scratched his head. You idiot, you can't train today, rest early. Yi Fuxian stared at the rest of his life, forbidding him to refuse. Okay. The rest of his life nodded, his realm rose, and his irritability improved. Yi Fuxian didn't say anything and turned to leave. The rest of his life didn't hurt, but he felt hurt. He knew that the rest of his life practiced this kind of pain, and he still had to suffer. Behind the power of annihilation is not only the transcendent talent, but also the pain that ordinary people cannot bear. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. Time passed day by day, listening to the wind party gradually ended, and the last strong battle began, and the city of the king of the Nandu country boiled. The extremely arrogant figures finally appeared on the stage and appeared in the vision of the people of Nandu country, showing unparalleled sharpness, and the final battle was about to begin. For all this, Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life remain ignorant. In the evening, Yi Tianzi returned to the palace with the people from the Kangai kingdom. Yi Lingxi came to Yi Fuxian's courtyard. Yi Fuxian Yi Lingxi found Yi Fuxian and shouted with a smile. Princess. Yi Fuxian looked at Yi Lingxi as he came over. Don't call my princess, just call me Lingxi. Yi Lingxi smiled. I will tell you, listening to the wind party will end tomorrow. Is it finally over? Yi Fuxian smiled, but it was held for a few days. Father Wang explained that we can return to the Kangai kingdom directly. Tonight is free. If you want to go out and relax, the night view of Nandu King City is still good. After today, there is no chance. Yi Lingxi smiled. Okay. Yi Fuxian nodded his head. He had been training in the palace lately, and he was so suffocated that he just walked in the Nandu King City and felt at ease, the same for the rest of his life. Listen to the wind party tomorrow is the day of the decisive battle. Today's Nandu King City should be alive. Chapter 140, Jewel Day. Yi Lingxi, Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life walked out of the courtyard, and Yi Danshan was waiting outside. We also shouted no dust, these people have been training in the palace lately, wait for him, Yi Danshan told Yi Fuxian. Okay. Yi Fuxian nodded. At this time, there were two Qianings passing by, Lin Yueyao and Painting Jixin. Seeing them together, Lin Yueyao smiled and said, what are you doing? Maybe he'll come back tomorrow for a walk in Wangqing. Yi Lingxi replied with a smile, you want to go? Lin Yueyao glanced at Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life. I haven't seen him for a few days, and nodded. Lin Yueyao said, okay. The two beauties approached quietly, and Lin Yueyao smiled at Yi Fuxian, finally can't. Yes. Yi Fuxian laughed. Tomorrow's listening party is coming to an end, but these people from the Tianyin Chu Kingdom and the Great Yan Kingdom have said a lot of unpleasant words. Do you want to go tomorrow? Lin Yueyao wondered. Is that so? Yi Fuxian shrugged and smiled. I didn't expect that. I didn't think of so many people. Looks like I'll see you tomorrow. Smell. Lin Yueyao gave Yi Fuxian a white look. Is this person shameless? After a while, Yi Wuchen also came. The group left the palace. Jing Yu and a few others followed them to protect them secretly. As Yi Fuxian and Yi Lingxi guessed, the king of the Nandu royal city today was truly alive and well. There are people everywhere in the restaurant streets, talking about the Tianzhao character who was born on the Wind Feast. The most beautiful place at night in King City is naturally Qixing Lake. When you come to the shore of the lake, there are many paintings of cruise ships anchored next to it. Some people also rent paintings and white water rafting on the lake. Yi Fuxian was sitting on the bow of the boat, and a light breeze blew in his face. That is very fun. The beauty made Yi Fuxian sound the scene when he fell in love with Hua Ziyu. It was on the shore of Qingzhou Lake, and the two came together holding hands. It still tasted sweet for a while, but sadly he didn't come this time. What are you grinning? Lin Yueyao asked, seeing the smile that appeared on Yi Fuxian's face. Yi Fuxian glanced at Lin Yueyao and then smiled. Follow me so much. Don't think about it, you have no chance. Cough. Yi Danshan was just brought in, and was caught. Someone said to the first beauty Kang Yeguo, you don't stand a chance, this is just shameless. Lin Yueyao glanced at Yi Fuxian with a hint of hatred. He had never been treated like this. In King Kangai City, where would he go if not the star holding the moon? Only Yi Fuxian never gave his face. Tomorrow is the day of listening to the Wind Party. Whoever thought you could finally dominate the 9 battle platforms? There was a cruise ship side by side, and the sound of discussion came from above. The West Tower of the Second Order Law Realm, Su Mu of the First Order Law Realm, and Yun Tianhao, the 8-star Glory Realm promoted in battle, are all extremely evil characters. The rest of the people on each battle platform are now left. The ones below are top criminals, someone said. Hi Fuxian, they naturally heard this voice. Qilu and Su Mu had never heard of it. It was no wonder that Yun Tianhao could be the most dazzling character right now. He is a soul map, and can summon various attributes. It is conceivable that his combat strength is really rare in the same world, and he did not expect that he would advance in battle. It's also interesting. It looks like his training is no slower than him. It was extremely rare for Yang Keng to be able to give birth to a character like Yun Tianhao, even though it couldn't be compared to him. It is true that once listening to the Wind Party, the genius of the devil is like a cloud. Many of those who were eliminated have very dazzling existences. It is a pity that they have found a stronger Tianzhao. That's right. It was only slightly overshadowed before Prince Hall. The boat passed, and the sound drifted. Yi Fuxian is still drinking and enjoying the beauty at this time. Yi Wuchen looked at Yi Fuxian and said, if tomorrow goes to the Wind Party, I am afraid that there will be all kinds of sarcasm. Moreover, after listening to the meaning of the Yun Chu Kingdom and the Dian Kingdom, after the Wind Party decides the battle, they may be shot. You want to learn the strength of the Tianzhao of all countries. Yi Fuxian looked at Yi Wuchen. Some people are too shy, Yi Wuchen whispered. Then let 'em be honest. Yi Fuxian smiled, and Lin Yueyao and Hua Jixin looked at the two who were talking, and thought they were quite capable. The paintings run all the way. In Qixing Lake, the people on the boating lake are almost talking about the Tianzhao character appearing in the Wind Party. When they came to Huxin Island, it seemed that there were more cruise ships. Their eyes were on one of the Huxin Islands. I saw there was a banquet there. Yi Fuxian looked up. It was where Prince Luo Junlin had a party that day. Today, Luo Junlin was there again, but the party was dazzling people who listened to the light in the party. Isn't this someone from the Kangai Kingdom? Someone noticed Yi Fuxian and his party. Indeed, that woman is said to be the first beauty of the Kangyi Kingdom, and her appearance is truly stunning. Someone looked at Lin Yueyao, and the three beauties together, which easily caught the attention of others, especially the paintings of Lin Yueyao and Yi Lingxi. Beauty is even more than that. That man is Yi Fuxian, a man from East Sea city of Nandu country, and went to Kangai country against his majesty's will. The emperor of Kangai country noticed him and came to Nandu country to witness the ceremony and listen to the Wind Party. Is it Yi Yetian? That face looks so good, I'm afraid that many women will fall, someone said. But the prince was dazzling after the king's palace came that day. Lately, he hasn't appeared while listening to the party. Many people who visited the lake paid attention to Yi Fuxian, and their voices spread out one after another, so that everyone on the lake island looked towards the lake, and then someone saw Yi Fuxian. Prince Luo came to see their painting in the middle of the lake. Yi Fuxian. Among the crowd on Huxin Island, Yun Tianhao stood up and walked to the edge of Huxin Island, looking at the paintings on the lake, his sharp eyes fixed on Yi Fuxian. Yi Fuxian lowered his head and drank, as if he didn't hear Yun Tianhao's shout and ignored it. Are you going to show up tomorrow? Yun Tianhao didn't care about Yi Fuxian's attitude. Although he had only seen him a few times, it seemed that he already knew what Yi Fuxian was like. Yi Fuxian was still stupid. The rest of his life stood up, glanced at Yun Tianhao indifferently, and then looked at Prince Luo there. At this time, Luo Junlin was drinking, and beside him was a beautiful and sexy woman, who seemed to be drinking because of her drink. Her face is very charming and very charming. This woman is Nandu King City, a family with all kinds of talents, and talents are very extraordinary. She did not hesitate to lower her dignity to accompany the prince to drink alcohol, because the prince is loved by the Suspension King Palace. She hopes that Prince Luo Junlin can take her with him. The sexy and charming woman looked at Wayne and saw the rest of her life standing there, smiling charmingly. This man is very burly and very ugly. Many people laughed, the practitioners listened carefully, the woman did not hide her voice, and the people in the painting heard it. Yi Fuxian looked towards Huxin Island and saw the prince and the women around him, and he couldn't help but laugh. Your Majesty is very interested, there is a wind and dust that women must accompany. The dazzling woman's face changed, and she felt a little embarrassed in an instant. Prince Luojun's appearance was calm and there was no wave. Now these things can make his mood fluctuate. On Lake Hard Island, several figures appeared to the shore. One of them looked at the painting, and there was a strong breath on his body, falling on the painting. This is the West Tower. The people who traveled to the lake were amazed. On the stage of Listening to the Wind, the West Tower reveals a peerless beauty, and no one can fight it in the second-order law battlefield. Yi Wuchen raised his head, his eyes were extremely sharp, like a sharp sword. He stood up and walked to the bow of the ship. The terrifying sword intent turned into a sword storm, and collided with the breath released by Qilu. Are you going to war? The eyes of the people around him were blazing. The talented figures of the Kangai Gafeng rank, and the peerless Tianzhao in Nandu Guo listened to the Wind Party. Who is strong and who is weak? Come back. Yi Fuxian opened his mouth, and immediately returned to the decline. The two breaths disappeared at the same time. In the middle of the lake in the painting, there was a huge wave that flew out of the lake. Looking at the paintings of the people of the Kangai Kingdom, the people here thought, after all, are they still afraid of colliding with the Nandu Kingdom's Tianzhao? After all, His Majesty is on Huxin Island. Tonight is destined to sleep. Today will be the day of the decisive battle. Many people in the Nandu Kingdom are very enthusiastic about them. They are heading to listen to the Wind Party. Some people even occupy positions in the middle of the night just to be able to see the decisive battle of the Wind Party more clearly. Those decisive Tianzhao figures also came early, and they attracted a lot of attention around the battlefield. The Yunku and Dian people also came. After listening to the Wind Party, they had to admit that the remaining talent was extraordinary, and many of them were no worse than them. Luo Tianzi also came. Looking at the beautiful scene in front of him, a smile appeared on his face. He was very satisfied listening to the Wind Party this time, and his son Luo Jun came and was rewarded by the king of the king's palace. How could he feel bad? Even today, some people will come to celebrate. This was the second time he had been so happy since he became the emperor of the Nandu Kingdom. The last time he ascended the throne, he saw his future. Now, he saw his son Luojun coming in Nandu country. Future Yi Tianzi came from the crowd, Yi Fuxian, the rest of his life, Yi Yechen, they all appeared today, and everyone from the Kangai Kingdom arrived. Seeing the excited crowd, Yi Fuxian's face smiled faintly. Listening to the Wind Party once every 10 years, today will be the birth of the most outstanding Tianzhao character in 10 years. Without yourself and the rest of your life, maybe it is.